I really enjoy telling these old stories about New York City youth gangs from the 1940s and 1950s. And I've been researching this topic for about 25 years or so. And today I have a story for you that I think you're going to enjoy. And so we're going to go all the way back in time to October 30, 1945. And as I tell the story, I want you to picture it with me. The time is 12:15 a.m. in the morning. It's October 30, 1945, and two patrolmen are walking their beat in Central Harlem. They're on West 138th Street and 7th Avenue. And they're looking around, looking for anything of suspicion, and they see some youths loitering in the lobby of the Renaissance Ballroom. Now, the Renaissance Ballroom, or the Rennie, as it was affectionately called, was the place to be in Harlem during these years and these decades. It was built in January 1921, and it had all kinds of events and acts. It had prize fights, it had stage acts, it had concerts, it had dance marathons. Anything that was cool, it was at the Renaissance. It was renowned for the music. You had very talented musicians from all across the world. You had Duke Ellington, you had Louis Armstrong, you had Billie Holiday, and many, many more. And I can just picture the partiers bopping and swaying to the music in the Rennie, enjoying themselves, having drinks, spending time with family and friends, going from table to table and just having a great time. But on that October 30, 1945, those youths were there for anything but a concert. Robert Ellison, who was one of the patrolmen who saw the teens, looked closer at them and he knew something was off. One of the youths was Amary Rucker, and as Robert Ellison looked at him closely, he realized that something was up. Amary was a member of the Bachelors gang. Now, what do I know about the Bachelors gang? Well, they're a Central Harlem gang, and they started in the summer of 1942. And they would roam the Harlem streets, and the police knew them as having fights with other clubs. Sometimes gangs were called clubs in those days. And what the Bachelors were fond of doing was stealing some liquor, drinking it, and when they are good and drunk, that is when they would go and fight enemy gangs. And I found a particular case of a boy who lived on their turf, and their turf was West 129th and 5th Avenue. That was their area where they operated. And one guy who lived on their street was in absolute fear of the Bachelors. They picked on him, they assaulted him, they robbed him, and he was in such fear that he actually bought a gun to protect himself. And I'm just telling you to give you an idea of how the Bachelors were as a gang. Very dangerous, very aggressive, and very violent. But that little example there that I just gave you was just one example. There was an even worse situation. In the summer of 1943, the Bachelors got into a gang fight with the Mutineers, another Harlem gang, and they actually stabbed and killed somebody. A butcher heart right to the heart. So understanding this background information on who the Bachelors were as a gang, it's no small surprise that Robert Ellison, the patrolman on the beat that very early morning on October 30, 1945, knew something was up and he had to be very careful. So Robert Ellison, he was in plainclothes, but Amary Rucker was street smart. He saw him and somehow he knew, and he whispered to his companions and he walked away. But Robert Ellison saw what was going on, and so he followed Amary and he stopped him and detained him. After he frisked Amary, he found a fully loaded .22 caliber Tsar revolver on Amary. Amary told Officer Ellison that he actually bought the gun or got the gun from a friend of his, but when he was asked for the name, he just couldn't quite recall the name of the person he got the gun from. And then he actually changed his story. This time he said he found the gun on the sidewalk somewhere in Harlem. And Patrolman Ellison was very skeptical about all of this, and he was of the opinion that Amary was holding the gun to protect himself or to get into a gang fight. And you know, Patrolman Ellison was bang on, because about 1 hour after he detained Amary, there was a gang fight on one of the streets very near the Renaissance Ballroom. And who was in the gang fight? None other than members of the Bachelors. And the fight was a very serious one. I'm not sure who it is that they were fighting, but somebody was fatally shot, and it was of Patrolman Ellison's opinion that Amary had the gun for that very fight. Of course, Amary vehemently denied all of this. I tried to find details, anything at all, on this gang murder that happened 1 hour after Amary was arrested. But unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. The closest I could find was a murder, actually, from October 14, but that was 2 weeks prior to this. And so I don't have any more information on Amary at this point, but if I find anything more on him, I'll be sure to share it with you later on. And this is the example of the type of story I just love to dig up and revive. Sometimes when something happens from many decades ago, it almost feels like it never happened. But it really did, and this is what I really enjoy doing, is telling those stories. And so thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see what I come up with for the next time.